If you scroll through the news today, the consensus is clear. The standoff between the US, Israel, and Iran is cooling down. The headlines suggest the worst is over, and global markets are breathing a sigh of relief. But look at this map. This is the Strait of Hormuz. It is a severe geographical bottleneck with 0 alternative shipping routes, and 20% of the world's daily oil supply is forced to travel through it every single day. When that route is threatened, the impact is immediate. Earlier this year, oil prices shot from $61 a barrel up to over $118. That's nearly a 100% increase in just 3 months, the steepest climb in almost 40 years. The problem with an energy spike like this is that it acts a lot like food poisoning. The moment you stop eating the bad food, you don't instantly feel better. The poison is already in your system, taking time to digest and spread before you feel the symptoms. The geopolitical standoff might be on pause, but that massive surge in oil prices has already been injected into the global economy, and it is working its way directly toward your bank account. Oil is the invisible ingredient in nearly everything you buy. Before an item reaches a store shelf, it has to be grown on a farm, processed in a factory, and transported in a truck. Every single step requires energy. When the cost of that energy doubles, those manufacturing and transport costs go right up with it. Eventually, those compounded expenses land directly on your grocery receipt, forcing households to rapidly cut back on their spending just to afford the basics. This creates a brutal scenario for businesses. On one side, their operational costs for electricity and transport are soaring. On the other side, their revenues are dropping because their customers are too stretched to spend. They are being squeezed from both sides simultaneously. To survive that pressure, companies have to make immediate cuts. They start small by slashing overtime hours and freezing new hires. But as the margin pressure continues, those small cost-saving measures quickly accelerate into mass layoffs. Even if your position feels incredibly secure today, the mathematical reality of this dual squeeze means the broader labor market is fragile. In recent history, whenever we faced an economic drop, like in 2008 or 2020, the government stepped in. Central banks cut interest rates, printed money, and deployed a safety net to catch the falling economy. Printing our way out isn't viable. 19% of all U.S. tax revenue now goes directly to paying interest on a $39 trillion debt, and cutting interest rates pumps more cash into the system, forcing inflation to surge faster. Economists call this setup stagflation. It happens when an economy shrinks and jobs disappear, but the cost of living keeps climbing. The tools used to fix the lack of jobs actively make the inflation worse, leaving the central banks trapped. The last time the global economy was caught in an oil-driven stagflation trap, the fallout wasn't resolved in a few months. It resulted in a decade of weak growth, fuel lines, and shrinking standards of living. Foreign governments are seeing this exact vulnerability. Central banks around the world have been quietly pulling their savings out of U.S. Treasury bonds, which are essentially government IOUs, and moving that wealth into physical gold to protect themselves from a weakening dollar. With high inflation, massive debt, and no room to cut rates, the traditional levers of economic rescue are jammed. There is no federal bailout coming to absorb this shock. When everyday costs spike, the pain is strictly mathematical. Data shows lower-income households spend roughly 33% of their entire budget on food. For them, doubled oil and food costs dictate whether they can afford to eat. For high earners, it's barely a rounding error. Even when governments try to help with price caps or subsidies, the money rarely stays with the consumer. Taxpayer funds offset the bills, but energy corporations charge full price and pocket the difference. This wealth is siphoned upward, squeezing the middle class further. To navigate this, your immediate priority should be your cash reserves. Pause any major financial commitments. If you are planning to take on new debt, sign a lease, or buy a car, wait. Keep that cash liquid to handle the incoming rise in your basic monthly expenses. Next, look at your income. In a fragile labor market, you need to make yourself difficult to replace by taking on extra responsibilities at work. Better yet, start building an independent online income stream so your livelihood isn't entirely tethered to a single corporate employer. The macroeconomic tools are currently completely jammed, and historical precedent shows these economic crises reliably transfer wealth to the top. The government cannot fix this for you. Your best defense is to take absolute control of your own financial foundation right now.